Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new Code Live. I see some familiar faces in the chat. Hi, Naked. Hi, Ike. It's a great pleasure to see you again. My name is Philippe Ozil. I'm a developer advocate at Salesforce, and today we're going to be talking about platform event publish callbacks. I hope you like the new theme. I'm trying out a new little themes, and you'll be seeing more of this in the upcoming Code Lives. Before we start, I have to give you the traditional forward-looking statement. So here we go again for the wall of text. So what this means, if you're not familiar with Salesforce presentations, is that we are a publicly traded company. So please make your purchasing decisions based on what is commercially available in the product and not on statements that I may make in this presentation. Now, the good news is that everything that I'm going to talk about today is GA. There's nothing that should be forward-looking. So we should be safe, but it's the drill. I have to still show you this. All right. So today should be a pretty short session. It's a complex topic, but I think we can cover it in a reasonable amount of time. And I generally don't have slides during code lives, but I do have a couple of slides just to set a bit the context so that we all are on the same baseline. And this will really help us really to streamline the whole session. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to share my screen and we'll go with two slides and I will share a bit what are platform events and how we can use them to stream. Bear with me a second as I launch this. All right, here we go. So what about platform events? So for those of you who don't know what platform events are, well, platform events are an event-driven technology that lets us send an event using the Salesforce event bus and push data to a number of subscribers. How does this work? Well, you have a number of ways in which you can publish events. Here, what I've listed on this slide are the techniques for publishing events within the platform. You can use Apex, you can use the APIs if you have a publisher that is outside of the Salesforce platform, and you can also use flows. So a mix of pro-code and low-code techniques. And what I want to focus on today really is the publishing and delivery process. So the way this works is that there are a number of steps that we need to go through in order to have our event being published and then delivered. And the first step that we go through is the enqueuing. And this is often this is often something that people fail to realize when they're using Apex, REST, or Flow. They're actually not directly and immediately publishing the event. They are enqueuing the event for publication. This part here is synchronous. We'll see a bit more what it means when we go into some Apex demo, but essentially, when you have your call to the Apex code that is called eventBus.publish, you're actually not publishing just right now the event. You're actually enqueuing it, placing it in a queue on the Salesforce event bus, and Salesforce event bus will then automatically publish it in the next step. So if we move forward in this diagram, the next step after being enqueued, the event is being published. But to do this, well, obviously the bus needs to be operational. It happens that sometimes you may have some publishing errors at this point. And we'll see that there are 2 points of failures here. The first point of failure, and there are a number of checks that are happening there, is in the enqueuing process. When we start to enqueue events, there are a number of checks that are happening. Typically checks for the structure of the event, the name of the event, whether we have the proper access rights. But then there are other things that may happen later on, other types of errors that may happen later on in the publishing phase. And this is where it's harder to diagnose and I would say adjust and adapt to handle those errors. So how do we do this? Well, we generally need something called asynchronous event publish callbacks. This is only available in Apex, but that's something that will save you and will give you fine control over the publishing process and give you, I would say, additional control over the type of errors that can happen, and it will let you also replay and retry things if something goes wrong. I see in the chat that there was a question about whether we were going to talk about managed subscriptions. We won't talk about this today, but I'm sure we'll schedule another dedicated code live just for this other topic. So sorry if you were waiting to hear about managed descriptions. I'm sure we'll cover this soon. Now back to our topic. So you see here, that's something that is really unique to Apex. You have final control over the publishing process. Now, this is not something that I can demonstrate in terms of I cannot trigger manually an error on this SOC event bus. This is something that should rarely happen, probably like in case there's a problem with the infrastructure, a downtime, some critical internal error due to Salesforce. That is not something that we can, let's say, simulate. What I can show you, however, is the logic of how we put in place this asynchronous event publishing callback. And that's what I'm going to share in the next and final slide of today's session. So what do we have? Before I jump into the code, I think it's kind of really important to show you the architecture, and it's always easier to show that with a diagram rather than looking at lines of code. We will go into the code for sure, but I want to show you first the implementation diagram. So let's say we have a publisher class. This is our class that is going to be sending our platform event. And we're looking at an Apex class, obviously. The first thing we want to do is to prepare a list of event info. So this is a custom class that I wrote myself. And what you need to put into this my event info class, whatever you name it, is two things. Actually, the first one is the minimum requirement. That's the event unique identifier, UUID. And I'll talk more about this later, but this is a unique identifier that lets us identify a specific platform event. This is very useful because if anything goes wrong or if the event is published successfully, we'll be able to track which event failed or which event succeed. And the UUID is here to help us map the actual platform event with the callback itself. We'll see that later on. Now, on top of the UUID, you may also store a selection of fields that are related to your event. What I heard from the engineering team is that they don't recommend that you store your entire event. You're free, of course, to try it. You could put the entire platform event as a field in the My Event Info object, but it's generally not recommended because all of this will be kept in memory, and the more events you publish, the more data you have in those events, the more load you put on the event publish callback. So they recommended that you stick to the minimum fields that let you replay or diagnose potential errors in the custom object my events info. All right, so in the publisher event class, before we even publish our events, we prepare this list of event info objects. Then we prepare our publish callback. So here, the implementation of our custom publish callback is the following. We are writing a custom class, and this custom class needs to implement two interfaces. And I said actually need. It's not actually need. It's more like can or should. You have the choice to implement one or the other. Nothing will force you to do both the failure callback and the success callback. But I think generally it's a good practice to implement both. And as you implement those two interfaces, this will add two methods on your class, the onSuccess method with a success result object and the onFailure with a failure result object. And we'll get into more details about what these do when we go into the code. Then another important aspect of your publish callback is that you have to declare, you don't have to, but it's generally the best practice. You should create an event map property on your class. And this property will be a map of string and my event info object. The string that we have here will hold the event unique identifier, the UUID for events. And you'll see with this event map, we'll have an easy way to relate our events with their actual event info object that contain the critical fields that let us diagnose what we should do in terms of success or failure. So that's the preparation. Now that we have all of this ready, we move on back to our publisher class, and we are ready to instantiate our callback. Now, our callback will be instantiated with the list of events that we want to publish, but not the events directly, the event info list that we've prepared ahead. So we create a new instance of our publish callback. And then finally, we call our eventBus.publish method. Now, what's really new here with event publishing callback is that you have a second parameter. The first parameter is your list of platform events, and the second parameter here is an instance of your callback. And remember that the instance of your callback also holds the list of information related to your events. Seems a bit like a duplicate, but you'll see why when you go into code, it's important to have the information placed both in the callback and also both in the publishing call. And finally, as you call the event.publish, remember that this doesn't publish the events, it's actually enqueuing the events for publication. What will happen asynchronously, however, is that your myPublish callback class will be called later on, and it will be called by the two methods that we've prepared, the onSuccess and onFailure. And depending on what happens when the event bus goes into the publishing phase, one of those two methods is going to be called, and maybe the two methods will be called, but they will be called synchronously with a set of platform events that have either succeeded or failed. That's the theory. It seems a bit complex like this, but I think it's a good start to look at this first, and after that, we'll be able to go really into the code. All right. Now, obviously, everything that I shared now, the source code that I'm going to show next and the diagrams are all part of content that I'll show and share in the resources, and you'll get to play with it yourself, obviously. All right. So that's it for the slides. Again, the codeLive is generally not something that shows slides, but I felt like it was important today to get started. So how are we going to work? In order to do our demo and our code to watch how it works, we're going to be using one of my favorite tools. Well, I'm also the author of this one. We're going to be using the Streaming Monitor. The Streaming Monitor is an app exchange application or just a package that you can get online. It's open source. And it lets you subscribe to events. And with this, you can follow what's going on in terms of events, whether you're talking about platform events, custom standard, custom channels, change data capture, all of this. And for today, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to open a event recipe demo platform event that I've prepared ahead, and we'll be subscribing to it so that we can track what's actually going on in our demo. So right now, the Streaming Monitor is monitoring our event recipe demo event, and I don't need to worry about it anymore. I'm going to actually show this on the side so that we can see both the code and the Streaming Monitor at the same time. Let me resize a bit my windows and move this to the side. And now let's go into the code. So what I did in this setup is that I've just taken a small bit of code that is actually placed into our Apex recipes sample app, and I want to focus just on this bit of code. If you want the full code example, you can go directly and grab the Apex recipes sample app from our GitHub repository. Again, I'll share all the resources later on. So let's start first with the regular publishing process. Here in this block of code here, you have what it takes to create a platform event and to enqueue it for publication. So the platform event that I've taken today is fairly simple. It has 3 fields. The first one is an account ID. It's a reference to one of my accounts that is placed on my org here. And you'll see why I've taken a reference to an actual object, because when we'll be doing the callback, we'll see that we can actually interact with this object, let's say. The second field is just a text field and then a URL. These aren't really important, but it's just to show that we can put some data in there. Now, the next part is what you typically would use before using platform event publish callbacks. You have your event bus publish method here, which enqueues. Again, it's not a publication. It enqueues your event for publication, and hopefully the status event bus will publish it. And then you notice that you do have some sort of error control here, because we get a database save result back after we publish. And what this means here, when we're able to do the is success or if there's an error, what this means is in fact the first level of check. When we enqueue our event publication, what we do check here is whether we have the proper access rights to publish this event, whether we have all the required fields, whether this, I would say, the structure, the data of the event matches what is expected. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to quickly just call this one to show you that this works. So I'm going to just grab this bit of code, which is just calling this in a anonymous context. And if everything goes well, we'll see in our, there we go. We have our platform event that got received by the streaming monitor. And here you can see the data of our event. So that's the first step. This is an event that works. Fine, no problem. Okay. Now let's see what happens, for example, if for example, we forget to set one of the mandatory fields. So if I go back in my my Apex class that publishes my event, and if, for example, I uncomment this mandatory field, the account ID is mandatory, and if I redeploy this bit of Apex, obviously we won't have a compile issue here. This will deploy fine, but when we're at runtime and we try to publish the event, we'll get a nice little error there. So let's see. Let me try again to publish the event now that we've removed the account ID. And now if we go and look at the logs there, we'll see that we failed to enqueue our event for publication. And then we got the first error. So how was it? How was this caught? Well, it was caught by the bit of logic that checked the save results. So we went into the second branch here. We failed to enqueue our event for publication. That's because we were missing a mandatory field. So that's typically what you do to check for errors when you publish events. That's the first level of safeguard you have. But again, this doesn't save you if there's a problem with the successful event bus. So what we're going to see next is how we can use the platform event publish callback to ensure that our event is sent in all cases, or at least we have a proper way to diagnose errors if it's not being sent. So I'm going to close this one, and we're going to go into the second method here, publish event with a callback. And I'm going to walk you over what's happening. So first of all, we're creating our event, same code as before, except there's something that is slightly different, and this was intentionally not shown on this screen, so I'm going to actually increase a bit the width of my window. You notice that I'm not using the typical constructor for my event. I'm using some, I would say, convoluted way of creating a new instance of my platform event. Again, if I scroll back up, here I'm using the typical constructor, but here I'm not. So why is this different? Well, this is required because when you use this method, the sObject.newObject method, which is available, by the way, on any kind of object, what you do with this type of method is that you initialize the event UUID field for your object. Now, you may not notice that in the previous example, but my event here has an extra field that is actually not shown when you look at the object description of your platform event. There is a UUID field on every platform event. And just to show you that, it's actually never shown in there, but if I open setup, if I go into the definition of my platform event, oops, you're going to see that it's listed here. It's not a field that I've added myself, but it's actually a field that is part of the standard fields that are added to every platform events. Now, this field here is really particular because it's a read-only field. You can't assign a value yourself. There are some methods to generate random UUIDs, but you can't assign a value to this field. And so the only way to get a unique identifier for a platform event, there are actually two ways. The first way would be to read our object after enqueuing it, because when you do a call to publisher, if you check your event object here, it has now a value for the UUID. It doesn't have it before, but it has it after. This is obviously too late for publish callback. But if you use this method, this constructor, this way of constructing the object, then you get a UUID assigned. So that's the first trick. You have to initialize your platform event with this construction method. Then you assign the different fields. If you remember, the next step was to prepare our event info. So here I don't have a list. I am only publishing one, but obviously this can work also with a list of event info. In my case here, what I have in my event info object is just the event UID. Remember, it has been generated by the constructor here. And I've placed only one field of my object. That's, I would say, the most important one for my object. That's my account ID field. Again, you're free to place as many fields as you want. You could even put your entire event in there if you wanted to. But again, just as a best practice, you should limit yourself to only a few meaningful fields. So that's my wrapper object to keep track of my basic information from my event that I'm going to publish. Then I create my constructor. I call my constructor of my callback, and I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm going to go now to the callback. What does the callback do? The callback implements the two interfaces that I shared before, the publish failure callback and the event publish successful callback. It has our event map, which has a string here, which is the event UID, and the event info object that we just saw earlier. Again, the event info object is simply a really basic wrapper with just our event UID as a string and the account ID that I'm going to pass to it. Going back up. What we have then is the constructor, which will simply take our event info list and initialize the map so that we have a quicker access to our event information. So the map is indexed with the UIDs, and then we have the entire event info object. In my case, it doesn't really make sense to have this wrapper object. I could directly put the account ID, but obviously in most cases, you will have to pass more than one field, and that's why you probably need this wrapper object to hold your event fields. Right? That's simple enough. So we call the constructor, and then I'll show you next how we call the on failure and on success, but I want to go back to the publishing code. So we were here. We were preparing our publisher callback. And if we move further down, we have our previous publication logic. It's exactly the same, except this time we have this extra parameter here. We pass the callback there so that it can be called. And the rest is exactly the same thing. We were able to catch errors. For example, if we were missing the account ID here, we wouldn't even go to the callback because we would just not even enqueue our event. We would be catching this as a database error here. But since our object is complete, we'll be able to move to the enqueuing. And then if there's an error, we would get into the callback and we would see what goes on next. So let me go now to the callback. When we publish our events asynchronously, so this can happen very fast or it can happen later, the platform will call our on failure or on success method. These two methods, again, that are defined by our interfaces. And from there, we'll be able to get result objects. There are two types of objects, the failure objects or the result object. They have very similar signatures. So in fact, it doesn't really matter so much which one you use. You can see the code is the same in both cases. And what I did to simplify is that I actually extracted the list of UIDs that were related to the success or failure call. You can see it's exactly the same thing below there. And I've regrouped my processing into a single method, sub-method here that will handle success or failures. It's just a matter of a Boolean flag, false if it's a failure or true if it's a success. Now this part is really custom. It's not meant to be part of the interfaces. That's just a simple way for me to regroup the processing. So I have my event UIDs. I know which events were impacted by the success or the failure, and I have the status if it's a success or a failure. Now, one thing I want to call out also that's extremely important and that's easy to forget about the callback is due to the fact that the callback is happening in an asynchronous way, you're losing the transaction context between the call to the event bus, the publish, and the callback. So here, for example, I may be operating with a given user, but as soon as I'm inside the context of the on success or on failure method, I'm being executed with the context of the automation user. So you have to be very careful about that because the running user is different, the permissions are different. And in my case, just to show you that my callback is actually working, I have a bit of logic here that will retrieve the information related to my account. So I'm going to use my event info field to retrieve my account IDs, and I'm going to grab my account objects that are related. Remember, I'm using system mode here because I'm no longer in the user context. And just as a quick way to show you success or failures, I'm simply attaching a task on the object. Pretty simple, and it should be easy for us to see whether the object whether the published callback fails or succeeds. So there's really nothing specific here, but again, we're working in a system mode, so that's also important here. I want to highlight this fact we're using the DML called as system because we are not using an individual user. And what I did in this case also is that I've tracked the owner ID of my account so that I could assign the tasks to the owner of the account. That's important because otherwise, if I were using the automated user, it wouldn't be assigned to anybody. All right. So I've been talking a lot. Let's see how this works. Now, instead of calling this bit of code, I'm going to call the new method here to publish with the event callback. And I'm going to actually open my account on the side here, and we'll be able to monitor our account. So this was hitting my awesome developer account. You can see here for now, there are absolutely no tasks in there. And normally, if everything goes well and I call my publish event with callback with LMS Apex, this should add a task to my awesome developer account. So let me just check. Yeah, here first we got our new platform event. It got published. So at least it really got sent. And then let me check again my my tasks on my account. There we have a new task, and that's just a follow-up on a successful event publishing. Right? That's it. That's the demo. Obviously, you can build way more complex scenarios. So one of the interesting things that you can do with the event callbacks is just instead, of course, of inserting new tasks like this, what you can do is work with retry scenarios. So based on the information that is in the wrapper object, the event info object, you could have enough information to trigger or schedule a retry of your failed events. Remember this wrapper object? If you have enough information, maybe you can enqueue or schedule a retry of the publication of your event. That's an interesting thing you can do. So that's it in a nutshell, how this works. And I'm gonna see if there are any questions here. Let's see. All right. Yeah. Okay. I saw some comments with the UID, so it's good. Yeah. This really is an important trick. Obviously, this is all documented. Before I forget, I'm gonna share the what you need to know about this. I wrote this blog post here, Track Platform Event Publishing, some time ago, and it's what you need to look at if you want to explore a bit how this works. I'm going to share, by the way, the a link to it. So that's sfdc.co/pe-callback, P for platform events, obviously. And then from there, you can get the link to the blog post. So the blog post contains the schemas that are just shared today. It has links to the source code and also a bunch of other things like a set of resources that you can use, like the Apex recipes and the developer guides that will give you more information about how the UUIDs work and some other things related to the event bus class. All right. I see some questions. How does retry work in this case? So retrying is simply a matter of calling again the event-bus.publish. So it's not an actual retry. There's no specific method for retry. It's just you re-enqueuing the event to be published later. And what I do recommend in this case, if you're building an architecture to do retry, you probably want to wait a bit before retrying to publish something. So you probably want to do a scheduled job or something like this, so that the SASOS event bus has enough time to recover from whatever error got you in this situation in the first place. So it would be a matter of enqueuing a job with the right amount of information to do the publishing again. Another scenario also would be to have some API calls to notify your Salesforce admin that something is wrong, or even probably also notify via the platform you're integrating with. That's also another option that you can use. All right. So that's it for what I wanted to show you today. I hope that it was clear. That was a lot, I understand, and that's, I think, why it was safer not... Oh, I see my webcam is not working. Let me fix that. A small glitch. Let me see if I can get back on screen. Let me see if I can get my face to show up. There we go. Here again. Oh no. Yes. Oof. All right. It seems like my hardware is misbehaving. Let me give it one more try. And if not, well, you'll see black, I guess, instead of my face. But I'm still here. Anyways. So, yeah, that's why I felt that we wouldn't have time for managed subscriptions. But point taken, I'll make sure that we cover managed subscriptions in the next episode. So we do have a couple minutes for questions if you have any. And I'll stay here. I'm gonna also, I've been monitoring YouTube so far, but I'm also gonna go and check on LinkedIn, because I know some other people are also on LinkedIn. So sorry for those who are actually trying to interact with me on LinkedIn. I didn't see your messages earlier, but let me see if I can also be there for you, because I don't want to leave anybody out there. Oops, sorry for the noise. Let's see, do we have comments? All right, see a couple of familiar faces. Nicolas, George. All right, sorry, I didn't see all your messages earlier. Is there any plan to have a callback if the platform is published from a flow? So that is not on the roadmap as far as I can tell. Right now, it's only in the same question from Ghost for APIs. This is only available through Apex at the moment. Now, I haven't heard of any plans to really change this. So I still hope it will happen, but no news from the roadmap. So that's something I can take probably to the PMs, because I know this would be useful. In Flow or in the APIs, you're going to be stuck with the same limitation. You're going to see only the database errors from the first checks on the DML and on the required fields, or the basic checks on permissions and the format of the fields. So yeah, that's not ideal, I know. I hope they will fix that later on, or not fix, but deliver those features, because I know how critical it is. All right, any other questions while I'm here? Can you go through event info one more time? What needs to be there other than UID? Of course, let me go quickly back to the code. Let me share again. Okay, there we go. So, from a diagram point of view, what you need in the event info object, or whatever you call it, is at least the event UID and possibly any other meaningful fields of your event. So when we go back and look at the code, in our case, we only had, in the event info object, we only had our account ID, because this was the critical piece of information for our platform event. But I could as well include additional fields. And this is what is going to be available in the on success and on failure objects, because with our event map that we've initialized during the call, during the constructor here, we have the event info object and the event UID, so we're able to see the data of our events in the on failure, on success handlers. It's important to note that the events themselves are not part of these objects. The failure result objects and the success result do not hold a reference to your to your um, to your platform event. So that's really important to notice, because you only have really the UIDs there. So if you need to do anything, you have to find a way to store this information to diagnose and to handle your failure or success. And that's where the event info object comes in handy. That's the way that you have to pass data from the publisher to the actual callback handler. I hope it makes sense. Again, if this was pretty fast, so I recommend that you check out the blog post. Then that should be helpful, because you'll have everything that I covered today. And maybe when you look at the code yourself, it may make even more sense. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope everyone had a good time and learned a few things there. I'll be probably online in the next couple of weeks. So hope to see you again on one of our code lives. Remember, this is a weekly format. So when it's not me, I have some of my wonderful colleagues there helping out. And you can always check us on the different social channels. Again, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook as well, but we're not streaming on Facebook. This event has been recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch it. Maybe give it a bit of time so that we clean up the video, but it should be online fairly quickly. And again, our content is also available on the website, developer.salesforce.com. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, have a good rest of your day wherever you are, and hope to see you soon online. Bye all.